Welcome everybody to the December 9th meeting of the Upper Arlington Community Center Feasibility Task Force. This is an exciting night. It's a culmination in many respects of all the hard work we've been engaged in over the last, how many months has it been? A lot. So appreciate everybody's patience and hard work. We're going to, here at the outset, approve the minutes from November 12th. I'll read the charge to task force, and then Margie and I will kind of talk through what our objective and procedures are for this evening. First, the meeting minutes from the November 12th session of the task force have been distributed in advance. I would open the floor for a motion for approval unless anybody has any corrections or edits to those.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay.
Hi, Nick.
Well, hey, Margie, how you doing?
Fine. My computer.
Timing's impeccable.
Thank you. I appreciate your starting the meeting. My computer shut down. So
Oh boy.
I know I had to reboot it. So
I'm going to read the charge and then we're going to go right into the objectives, if that's okay.
perfect. Go right ahead.
Okay, we like to begin every meeting kind of grounding us with the charge council gave to this volunteer representative group of Upper Arlington citizens. And the charge reads as follows. 1, review a history of previous efforts to develop a community center. 2, review findings of the Upper Arlington Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. 3, review of our existing facilities and programs, including a review of options for the replacement of our existing senior center. 4, review possible locations for a community center. 5, review of indoor recreation and community center gatherings outside of Upper Arlington. 6, examine prospective cost scenarios, including possible amenities and associated costs, public-private partnerships, funding strategies for operating, for capital and operating costs. 7, involve community participation in the feasibility study. And 8, provide a recommendation to City Council based on feasibility study findings to consider proceeding with the community center in Upper Arlington. So Margie, with that, I'll turn it over to you to talk through a little bit about what our objective and proceeding procedures are for the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Welcome to everyone on this really important Wednesday evening of the Community Center Task Force. We clearly we're nearing the end of an extensive and robust study process that began, believe it or not, almost 18 months ago. It's been a great honor for Nick and me to lead this effort as the co-chairs and work with our fellow 14 volunteers who represent the task force members, guided by our consultants, as well as the terrific staff at the City of Upper Arlington. I want to thank every single one of the task force members that are on this evening. You have done extraordinary work, brought new meaning to the notion of a working task force. And we're so grateful for the work that you've done. And in the kind of true UA fashion, the level of interest and community engagement throughout this process has energized our work. We said from the onset that community engagement would be at the forefront, not just in phase 1, but throughout our process. And we have done exactly that. Hearing from the community, reaching out to the community, and we're excited that there's been so much engagement. As you know, we were charged by City Council to explore the community's need and desire for a community center. So do we need one and do we want one? And then to determine if that facility would be feasible in Upper Arlington. So in phase 1, and we've reviewed this many times, and we may review it briefly again this evening. In phase 1, we affirmed with a huge amount of outreach that the need for a community center and identified that individuals and community members really do want a community center. And so we also, as part of that, got a lot of terrific input on what residents would like to see in that community center. So Nick, I'm gonna turn it over to you to talk a little bit about phase 2.
Great, thanks, Margie. In phase 2, the facility subcommittee considered potential sites and developed facility concepts, while our finance subcommittee studied the capital and operating costs and funding options associated with the community center. For this evening, our primary objective, as was noted in the cover email you got from the city, from Margie and myself, is to ultimately discuss and vote on the recommendations that we will present to City Council next Wednesday, December 16th. And to really summarize the work of the 3 respective subcommittees, we're going to have a presentation by each of the 3 subcommittee chairs. The draft resolution was emailed to all of you on Monday along with the agenda, and I would encourage you to refer to that resolution as we go through the subcommittee presentations, because we believe that the work that the subcommittees will be discussing is appropriately referenced in the resolution. We'll begin with Supin, who will highlight the themes we've constantly heard from our residents and colleagues throughout the process, with a focus on the results of the final statistically valid survey. And we're thrilled to be joined this evening by Paul Fallon, Fallon Research and Communications, who will be with Supin for that piece of it. Secondly, on the facilities subcommittee, Greg's going to summarize the work and findings of that important group, which includes location features and program for the building, as well as recognition that these findings were heavily informed by the work of the community engagement subcommittee's work in phase 1 and the research that's been conducted throughout phase 2. And then finally, but arguably most importantly, building on the work of the 2 other subcommittees, Matt's going to overview the findings that the finance subcommittee has had relative to costs, funding options, and business plan scenarios for the building and operating of a community center. So Margie, I'll kick it back over to you.
Great. So once again, I want to thank the work of all 3 subcommittees and the subcommittee chairs. This truly was driven by our task force, as I said, with terrific guidance and support from our consultants and from Steve Shoney and his staff. So I would encourage all of the members of the task force to listen to the 3 subcommittee reports. And at the end of each of the subcommittee chair reports, we're going to open it up for any questions you may have. So Supin will go first with Paul Fallon, and then we'll open it up to questions you may have. And then we'll do the second subcommittee report and the third one. And so following the presentations, we're going to, we'll formally introduce the resolution, and we'll have that. You should have each gotten that, and I think we'll be placing it up on the screen so that we can review that. And then after the resolution is presented, we're going to seek public comment. This is a really important part of the work that we've been doing. For residents attending the meeting this evening, thank you for joining us. If you wish to speak during the public comment period, you can submit an email request to the city clerk via city.council@uaoh.net. That's city.council@uaoh.net. Just do that in the next 20 minutes if you could, so that we can have a record of everybody who wants to present. When your turn comes up, we'll bring you into the meeting. We ask that individuals limit their comments to 3 minutes, just out of respect of all the individuals that want to present. So we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to present. This is an opportunity to hear your voice and have your opinion heard. At this point, we're not going to be responding to questions that you may be asking. We'll certainly do our best during the process to answer questions. If there are questions that you feel have not been answered, then we will be following up with you individually so that we can really be responsive to any of the questions that you have. Once the public comment is over and we've received all of that, we will then transition to an open discussion by the members of the task force so that the members of the task force can have the opportunity to have heard the public comment, not just this evening, but throughout this process, and be able to really understand and respond to any of the questions that they're asked. And at the conclusion of all of that, then we're going to ask for a motion and a vote on the proposed resolution. So that brings us to item 2 on our agenda. We really wanted to lay out the process and the chronology for the evening. So I'm going to hand this over to Supin, our Community Engagement Subcommittee Chair, to make your report on community engagement. Take it away, Supin.
Thank you, Margie. First, I want to thank the members of the subcommittee, Diane Albrecht, Kelly Boggs-Leip, Mary Hamilton, and Linda Moulakis for your ideas and support as we developed and implemented the community engagement process. Collectively, the subcommittee would like to thank the consultants and staff who helped turn our ideas and wishes into effective outreach and engagement activities that generated the results that we have. The entire study process has been supported by an extensive outreach campaign that has included the dedicated task force website, regular updates in the UA Insight resident newsletter, e-newsletter updates to more than 14,000 community members, promotions on the city and Parks and Rec Department social media platforms, and advertisements, postcards, and posters. So the work of the Community Engagement Subcommittee has had a greater emphasis in phase 1 of the study as we sought to answer the questions of if the community wants and needs a community center. And we sought input from the residents on what kind of facilities and programs should be included. This included a statistically valid survey that yielded 632 responses, more than a dozen community pop-ups that reached 460 residents and generated great feedback on what they would like to see, what the residents would like to see at a community center, stakeholder interviews and focus groups, and community meetings and presentations. In the phase 1 survey, we found out that the top activities that households would use are fitness and exercise, various classes, aquatics, drop-in activities, lifelong learning classes, and senior activities. The top features that households would use would include weight room and cardio facilities, a walking and running track, aerobics and dance offerings, aquatic programming, and senior programming. In phase 2, outreach efforts included just keeping the community up to date on the study, and we had 2 community meetings. During phase 2, the major focus was on the development of a second statistically valid survey, which was turned also into an online survey for everyone to complete. And that yielded 1,600 responses. So Paul Fallon is with us here tonight to share highlights from the survey. Before I want to turn it over to him, I do want to share some key themes that emerged from both surveys and other inputs throughout the study process. There is a strong support for a community center if it can be funded without an increase in taxes. A majority of residents believe a community center should be centrally located and easily accessible by car, by walking, bicycle, and users of mass transit. There is a strong preference for not taking away any existing green spaces in order to build the community center. And there is a support for relocating the existing senior center into a multi-generational community center to provide a broader range of programming and facilities for a wider audience of older adults. At this time, I want to introduce Paul Fallon from Fallon Research and Communications to give us an overview of the second statistically valid survey.
Thank you very much. Jeff, can you put the presentation online? While Jeff is doing that, I'll make a brief introduction. I'm Paul Fallon with Fallon Research and Communications, and I'm going to be presenting the results of a telephone study that was recently conducted. It was drafted in collaboration with the city staff and addresses some of the very issues that have been raised during the course of this discussion. Let me just see if I can make sure that Jeff's got everything he needs. Jeff, are you going to put up that presentation?
Paul, give me just one moment here.
Okay.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that had a little difficulty.
Apologize for that. I mean,
No worries.
I'm having a hard time finding it here.
That's okay. You get a lot of documents.
Today. By the way, while he's doing that, let me mention that what I'm going to be doing with the 10 minutes that I've been allotted is providing a brief overview. I've submitted the entirety of the presentation as well as all the supporting materials to the city administration already. And the presentation itself is probably something that would normally take about an hour to deliver. And I know you've got a lot to cover tonight, but I'm going to briefly hit on some of the highlights.
All right, I got it here, Paul. We're bringing it up now. You see it?
Fabulous. Is that on PowerPoint? It looks like a PDF file.
This is the PDF. Do you need the PowerPoint?
Yeah, this is the longer file. Do you want me to put my version up?
Yeah, if you have it ready, go ahead.
I think I do. Pardon me for just a moment.
Jeff, do we have to give Paul permission to bring something up?
No, and Paul, I do have the abridged version here as well. And then
Why don't you go ahead and put that up then, if you don't mind.
Yep, here we go. Okay, this is it. Oh. I'm not able to share.
In Jeff's defense, he has done probably about 100 of these with us. And for this to be the first time that we've had Jeff not be completely 100% on top of everything, we have proven that Jeff is not perfect, and it's taken us 18 months to prove it. So thank you for your patience, everybody.
Yes, and thank you, Jeff, for being a trooper. Okay.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to ask you to change the slides at appropriate points. Very quickly, let me go over the methods for gathering the data. This survey was conducted through telephone interviews with 300 randomly selected registered voters in the city of Upper Arlington. For 300 respondents, the overall estimated margin of sampling error is plus or minus 5.6% or 6% with rounding. That just means if we asked, for example, what is your favorite topping on a pizza? If 50% of the respondents said black olives, because of sampling variability, that number could be as low as 44% to as high as 56%. And this survey was conducted during the period of November 16th through November 20th, so the data is very recent. And lastly, let me mention that the data was stratified, so the results represent all respondents in proportion to their percentages of the city's electorate. Could you change the slide, please? And once again, please. One of the first things that we did was we asked about, I think we advanced too far. There, no, next slide. There you go, thank you. One of the first things that, that's not the right slide, is it?
Next one in there.
Okay. Okay, for some reason, there's a little bit of a problem there. Actually, why don't we skip this first slide since it's not important to the discussion. One of the first questions we asked on the survey was sensitivity to property tax rates. And as you can see, at the time the survey was conducted, 43% of respondents said property tax rates were too high, 49% said pretty fair, 1% said too low, and 7% were unsure. Now, why we asked this is because one of the potential funding mechanisms that we tested for the community center was one that had property tax implications. As you can see, at the time of the survey, nearly a majority, 49%, said taxes were generally pretty fair. And the way that I interpret data like this is anytime the extreme response option, which in this case is too high, equals or exceeds the more moderate response option, which in this case is pretty fair, I say to myself, we've got something that's an important emotional trigger point. But that wasn't the case here. Actually, sensitivity to property taxes was pretty modest. However, I do want to point out one of the subgroup differences. As you can see from the horizontal bar chart on the right-hand side of the screen, among staunch opposers, that is people who voted against both of the two ballot tests we conducted during this survey, 67% said taxes were too high. So it provides a little bit of a window of explanation into why they opposed it. Please change the slide. We also asked about awareness of the community center, and at the time, 70% were informed. That is, 18% said they had heard a lot about the proposed community center. 52% said they'd heard some information. 28% said they'd heard nothing at all, and 1% were unsure. Let me point out that for the purposes of this survey, we consolidated those respondents who said a lot with those who said some, so we had a total of 70% informed. But honestly, that's something of a misleading number because actually, while the level of information is a mile wide, it's probably only an inch deep, with just 18% saying they've heard a lot of information. So at this point, critical first impressions are still being formed. Also want to point out among supporters, that is people who voted for both of the ballot tests, the informed rate was at 73% compared to 60% for those opposers, that is people who were voting against it. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. We also asked, based on what you know at this time, do you support or oppose having the city construct a community center for athletics, fitness, arts, recreation, and civic uses in Upper Arlington? And this is really just a concept test without any reference to the cost or any of the other considerations. It's just a very broad fundamental overview. And as you can see in concept, 75% supported the idea, just 14% opposed it, and 11% were unsure. But something that I thought was particularly interesting was when I looked at the subgroup analysis, as you can see on the right-hand side in the horizontal bar charts, among the staunch opposers, that is the people who voted against both of the ballot tests, even 12% of them liked the idea in concept. And that should give you some idea of how popular it is. But I also want to point out that a lot of these subgroup differences were not statistically significant. And without getting into too much detail or minutia about math, that means that for those groups, and they're noted with asterisks, that means the sentiments were consistent across the board, and there were a lot of them. Very few subgroup differences of note. Could you advance the slide? And one more, please, Jeff. Thank you. We also asked about integration of the senior center into the community center, and they garnered 68% support, 25% opposed it, and 7% were unsure. As you can see from the horizontal bar chart next to the pie chart, among staunch supporters, 77% said it was a good idea, but even 20% of staunch opposers supported it as well. Also want to point out a couple other subgroup differences. Among respondents 60 and older, 59% supported, and among senior center users, denoted by SC users, 60% supported. So that was a very popular aspect as well. Please advance to the next slide, Jeff. Thank you. We also tested 2 different locations, and we did something a little different here. We used what's known as split sample methodology, in which we randomly assign respondents to one of the 2 question versions. For example, half the respondents were assigned to question version A, which asked, do you support or oppose locating the proposed new community center at the site of the vacant Macy's building at Kingsdale Mall? And in that version, 82% supported, 12% oppose it, and 6% were unsure. Also want to point out, as you can see from the call out box with the horizontal bar chart, even among staunch opposers, 31% like the Kingsdale location. And keep that in mind because you're going to see something different in just a moment. In the other version, which was asked to the other half of the respondents, we asked, do you support or oppose locating the proposed new community center at the site of the vacant Kingsdale building at, Macy's building at Kingsdale Mall, which would cost the city about $50 million. Here we're adding a finance element to it as well. And as you can see, even there, 75% support it, just 16% oppose it, 9% are unsure. And when we compared the differences between the 2 versions, they were not statistically significant, which is good news in this case. The idea didn't lose much support, statistically speaking, when the notion of a cost was introduced to it. Jeff, could you go to the next slide, please? We also tested one other version, and by asking, do you support or oppose locating the proposed new community center at the site of the current city administration building on Tremont Road, which would require a new consolidated building to be constructed so the site could accommodate both the community center and city offices. Only 25% supported this version and 59%, a statistical majority, opposed it, and 16% were unsure. Like the previous test of the Macy's site, we also did split sample testing here, in which the other half of the respondents were asked that very same question, but also told that it would cost the city about $75 million. And in that version, 71% supported, while 23% supported, 71% opposed it, and 6% were unsure. Also want to note too, as you can see in the call out box on the right-hand side of the screen, among staunch opposers, 94% oppose this site. So clearly the Macy's Kingsdale site was eminently more popular than the city administration site. Please advance to the next slide and the next one, Jeff. Thank you. We also did 2 ballot tests, and keep in mind, these are colloquial versions of concepts that you might see on the ballot without the legalese that's required by law. For example, we asked respondents, would you vote for or against authorizing the city to issue up to $55 million in bonds that would be repaid through existing revenues without raising any new taxes for the purpose of constructing a community center? 79% said they'd vote for it, 13% against it, 8% were unsure. And as you can see from the horizontal bar chart at the right-hand side of the screen, support was at or above the 60% threshold for every subgroup in the survey. By the way, go back just a slide, Jeff. By the way, I mentioned just a moment ago that we use colloquial language, and I think that's important to keep in mind here because as you can see, the phrase without raising any taxes was included in this question. And I know from past experience working on ballot issues, taxes and levies, that would not be allowed in the version that would be placed on the ballot for voters to consider. So keep that in mind. Go ahead and advance, Jeff. We also tested a property tax by asking, would you vote for or against authorizing the city to levy a 30-year, $0.5 mil property tax, which would cost property owners about $18 each year in additional taxes for each $100,000 of property value for the purpose of constructing a community center. In this version, 64% said they were voting for it, 31% against it, and 5% were unsure. As you can see, there are some more subgroup differences, but it did not drop below the critical 50% threshold for any. And as you can see from the horizontal bar chart on the right-hand side of the screen, the biggest differences were among partisan political groups, with 78% of registered Democrats supporting it compared to just 50% of Republicans and 66% of unaffiliated voters, which are the lion's share of voters in Upper Arlington, voted for it as well. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Those respondents who were asked, who said they were voting against both of the preceding ballot issues were asked an open-ended question, which is, what is the biggest reason you would vote against both of these issues? And keep in mind, this was just a subsample of 32 respondents, but the most frequently given response was that they just didn't think the facility was needed. At 26%, 21% said they were opposed to a tax increase, 12% said funding will not or has not been spent properly, 10% said it just cost too much, 9% said they were opposed to change, 6% said it was not a priority for tax dollars, and 16% gave other responses. If you look to the right-hand side of the screen, there are some responses in quotes. These are actual verbatim responses that we gathered during the survey. Let me read a couple of them to you very briefly. I don't think there's a huge need for a community center, one person said. Another respondent said, I think it's financially irresponsible. Also, I don't trust the city in terms of construction management projects. Another respondent said, I do not wish to pay higher taxes, simply put. And another one said, costs, and it would not serve enough of the community. Now, I should have mentioned in my introduction, but I have two areas of specialization. One is land use issues, and the other is public funding issues that require voter approval. And I can tell you from past experience that those are pretty benign objections compared to some of the things I've seen in other issues. Go ahead and advance to the final slide. With that, I am glad to take any questions that anyone has, but let me mention first and foremost that all of the information has been submitted to the city manager's office, so you can review the survey results, the crosstabs which break the data down by subgroups, the verbatim responses, and the chance that you want to read them all, as well as a full presentation.
Thank you, Paul. That was terrific. Any members of the task force have questions?
I just had one. It's not really a question, I don't think, but on that last slide, just to make sure it's clear, the 26% of those that say they doesn't need a facility, that's 26% of the people that oppose.
Right. Right. That was a fraction.
Not 26% of the respondents, but 26% of the people that oppose the community center.
Right. It was about 3% of the response frame.
Okay. I think that's just to be clear. Thank you.
Other questions by any other members of the task force? Okay. That's great.
Thank you for having me this evening. And if anyone's got any subsequent questions, feel free to reach out and I'll respond as quickly as I can.
Appreciate that, Paul.
My pleasure. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you. So next, we're going to have a report by the facilities subcommittee and recommendations. Greg Comfort, subcommittee chair, along with Nan Weir, who's with Williams Architect. Greg?
Okay, we're Nan and I are going to tag team this a little bit. What I want to do is go through, and this document was distributed to all the task force members, so hopefully had a chance to look at it. It's basically a summary of the findings of our subcommittee. We've had a lot of meetings, done a lot of hard work over the last number of months. And we basically have a series of a recommendation that we want to make. But before we do that, I want to give the background and take you through this. I'm not going to do it in copious detail, but enough to kind of give you an idea of what our thinking is. Firstly, on phase one, just in terms of the study, we had, based on the statistically valid survey, there was certain square footages that were recommended for the various uses, and you can see that in the document that was sent. And I think Supin had mentioned those already. There was a couple things that came out of phase one that are really important, and I do think it's worthy of me mentioning those again. Number one, it's important that the community center have space to replace the existing senior center so that it would accommodate seniors. And we have the ability then as a community to have this as a multi-generational facility, accommodating the seniors, and the existing senior center would go away. Secondly, this facility would be not just a recreational facility, but would serve as a central gathering place for the whole community. The residents that were surveyed basically said that it's very important that this community center be central to the community. That was a big issue, and that multiple means of access, pedestrians, bikes, transit, etc., could certainly, the site that we picked would have those kind of means of access. Real strong opinion, and this really influenced how we looked at things. Residents did not want to lose any existing green space or parkland. UA is underparked, and so people basically don't want to see their green space go away. And there was a number of other programmatic things that came out that I've already mentioned. So all of these kind of principles that came out of phase one guided our actions in phase two. So in phase two, we began the effort. Nan, if you can put up the slide that shows the sites. Nan, do you have access to that?
Yeah, it's coming right now.
So in phase two, we started out with identifying, we actually started out with 14 sites. We winnowed that down to eight sites that either the city owned or had some cooperation with a private property owner. And we looked at these sites and evaluated them using the criteria that were important that came out of phase one. And that, go back there, Nan.
Okay.
Slide. I think you can see there the things that were really important. Number one, site control. Number two, it protects existing parkland. Number three, the ability to have creative funding. That was important. Number four, accessible to all modes of transportation, supports multi-generational use. And lastly, is in a central location. So we looked at all 8 of those sites. We went through a matrix analysis of them and winnowed it down to 2 sites. And the 2 sites that came to the top, the number 1 site was the Kingsdale site, the Macy's site, and the number 2 site was the MSC site. And these were the point values that we came up with for that. And so what we did from there is we made the decision as a committee to have Williams Architects and OHM proceed on preliminary conceptual design of both sites so that we could evaluate them further from a number of different factors. And so the first site, and I think if you can pull up the MSC site, do you have that, Nan?
Meaning the site plan?
Site plan, yeah.
Yeah, let me just flip to that a second. Yeah. I just have the aerial, I guess, in this deck. So
That's
let
fine.
me share this again.
You can put the arrow up.
Yeah, this is with the MSC
Yeah,
concept.
that's fine. That's fine. So
Okay.
that's all I need. The really looked at 2 ideas for the MSC site. One was the saving of the existing MSC building and building around it. That's what you see on the left. I think we all quickly concluded for a number of reasons that didn't make sense. The new building would dwarf the existing MSC site. It would use up most of the green space. There were parking issues. Plus we had to build a parking garage over by Trouville. And for all those reasons, we decided no, that the right way to do this site, if this were to be the site that goes forward, is we'd have to rebuild the whole building and include the city services as part of that building. So what you see on the right side is a building that has a parking garage in the middle with city services either on the left or the right, and the community center on the other side. So we went through some concepts for that, some blocking, some stacking diagrams, some layouts, et cetera, that we looked and reviewed. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because that's not the site that we're going with. So let's move on to the Kingsdale site.
Let's see.
So there's the Macy site. And then if you can show the proposed layout, that's the existing building, obviously. This, you can see surrounded by the big red lines is the proposed community center building on the site that's being redeveloped. There's some apartments being done, senior housing, et cetera. We've been through this in a number of meetings. So on this site, Williams and OHM did a stacking diagram and also took it a little bit further and have shown some interior elevations. So Nan, maybe you want to just take some time and just take everybody through those so they can kind of understand what this building, what it looks like.
Okay. So this is the ground level plan, and Tremont Road is here, and this is the entrance into the site that aligns with Ridgecliff Road. So on the ground level, this is the community center building here, and there's 60 spaces either under the building or along this little alley to the south side of the building. And then there's a large lobby space that will have a control point that'll limit access to the community center. And also on this first floor level is the aquatics, multi-use pool and party room. And then there's also a lobby for the office building, which is on the top floors of the building. And you can enter either from the site outside or the parking garage. And then there's a large parking garage over here, as well as surface parking at the north end of the Giant Eagle lot. On the second level, you have group exercise. So this is where the yoga classes would be, or a spinning class, as well as fitness. So this is where the weight machines and free weights would be, as well as some staff work areas and an overlook into the pool and into the lobby. Level 3, we have three full high school basketball court-sized gymnasiums that would also allow for volleyball, pickleball, you name it. In those gyms, there's also a child watch area right off the lobby, so people can work out and have their children watched while they do that, as well as a esports game room and adventure play and analytical fitness. And we'll share an image of the adventure play. The analytical fitness is really doing a lot of statistics on your exercise, and you can keep track of that, and you can compete against others as well. So the fourth level is the track, and that overlooks the gyms as well as some stretching areas. The fifth level is senior space. So there's a senior lounge, there's billiards, there's this multi-function room that can accommodate 250 people sitting at tables and chairs, a large outdoor patio space, as well as some multi-use rooms and arts and craft room, and some additional staff space, and then some additional office space on this level or potential partner space in the future. Then level 6 and 7 are the same. They both have some mechanical space and 25,000 square feet of office space. And then this is just this is not an actual design. It's really just showing sort of the volume and the massing of the community center. So you can see the 7 levels, and this is where the outdoor deck is on the Tremont side. These are some interior views of what the interior might look like. So this is the lobby. This would be the check-in desk. We're imagining a coffee kiosk and a very active lobby where people can gather, they can wait for a ride, or you can see the monumental stair that leads up to the exercise floors. There would also be an elevator bank. This is a view of the pool that shows sort of the multi-functions. So a zero entry pool with some players for some younger children. And then in the background, you can see a slide and some lap lanes, as well as just some open water. This is a view from the track level overlooking the gym. And in the background, so the two wooden floor gyms are here and the MAC gym is behind us in this view. And then this front area is the adventure play area. This is just a suggestion of what it might be. You know, this is very popular, the Ninja Warrior, or a lot of the competitive competition type fitness activities are part of this adventure play. We don't know exactly what that would be yet, but this is a suggestion of what it might look like. And you can see the track up here as well. This is the senior lounge. You can see fireplace, some lounge seating. This is a window that'll actually go into the kitchen that serves the multi-function space. So there'll be coffee service there as well. You can see a resource area back here to be connected with others, billiard room in the back. And then down the corridor is the multi-purpose room and the art room and the patio spaces. This is a view of the multi-purpose room. I think one of the great features of this is that this is looking south and to the west. So to the south, you would have a great view of Upper Arlington and also probably a nice view looking downtown. And to the west, you'd also have a great view over the top of looking towards the river. And you can see that we're showing a wall that opens up to show that the outdoor patio. So during the appropriate times of the year that could be opened, and it'd be a great space for a wedding reception or a large business meeting. This is a suggestion of what the patio might look like. There could be seating outside as well as fitness classes. So it could be a very flexible multi-use space. So that's the end of our views. Do you want to move to the
pull up the estimate?
Yeah.
I'll address that now. So anyway, yeah, based on what Nan just presented, obviously it gives you a good feel for what the building can look like. It's going to evolve as it's designed, but I think it gives you a really good impression of what this facility can do. So from there, we looked at both sites, the MSC site and the Kingsdale site. And Williams spent a lot of time. They actually went through 2 iterations of estimating, and then we really went through a 3rd iteration using a couple of contractors, local contractors, and one of them spent a whole lot of time on it, and that's Gilbane Building Company. And they went through it in a very detailed way and actually did it from a little bit different approach than what Williams did. And what's interesting is the numbers from both estimates came out within a couple % of each other. So we felt pretty comfortable with the estimates that have been created here. So just as a overview, the hard construction cost, and I'll go through the Kingsdale site first, that's the right column, is about 44 million. Soft costs, and that includes architect fees, engineer fees, any consultants, legal fees, furnishings, equipments, and a little bit of contingency. You add that together and you get a total project cost of 50,400,000. We did include in there an escalation factor, which accounts for inflation, assuming about 2.5 years out at 3% a year, about 3.8 million. That gives us a budget of about $54 million for the project. The MSC site, when you go through the same analysis, ends up being $82 million. The main difference between the 2 estimates is when you build on the MSC site, you have to rebuild the whole municipal building also. So there's a lot of square footage that has to be rebuilt because the existing MSC building gets knocked down and then that building has to accommodate that. So, and there's more parking garage also that has to be built. So it's definitely, it's about a you know, $28 million premium roughly to build the MSC site over the Kingsdale site. One thing I want to note is, and we had a lot of discussion about this as a committee, this project budget at 54 million includes a 10% design contingency, a 3% construction contingency, a 3% owner contingency, and about an 8% escalation factor. So if you add all those contingencies and escalation factors, you're taking the cost as estimated and adding about 24% to it. So we feel very comfortable that the numbers that we're showing are conservative, that we can stay within this budget as we move forward. So that was important to us as a committee, that we represent the right number so that the planning can move forward using the right number. So given that, we made in the document, there's a recommendation that we are making for the Kingsdale site to move forward. And our goal as a committee was to recommend a site, and this is the site that we're recommending. And we outlined the reasons. And let me just kind of go through those real quick, and then I'll open it up to any questions. Firstly, Kingsdale is more centrally located than the MSC site. The MSC site, a little further north, a little further east. Kingsdale is definitely more centrally located in the community and feels more centrally located. Secondly, the pedestrian, bike, mass transit can all be accessible to the Kingsdale site. And at the MSC site, to accommodate that, the city engineer has determined that there'd be a number of improvements, traffic improvements that would need to happen, namely a roundabout at the Kenny Tremont intersection, and that number is not even included in the numbers that we just showed. I think the committee really liked the synergy that's created at the Kingsdale site with the adjacent retail, office, dining, residential uses. There's a lot of synergy there. The MSC site is a standalone site, more of a destination. This site has a lot of synergy. There's a lot of complementary uses. Probably the biggest criteria is the Kingsdale site costs $28 million less than the MSC site. I think that in and of itself is a big persuading factor. And then lastly, and you already saw this in the statistically valid survey, the community supported the Kingsdale site to the tune of 75% positive response, whereas the MSC site only received about a 24% positive response. So the recommendation of the committee based on all that is that we move forward with the Kingsdale site. And the only other caveat we have in there is, as the design proceeds, once, assuming there's a successful vote in May, that there still be some community input and still some interaction and community collaboration as we move forward on the design, because obviously there's a lot of pieces and parts that still need to be put together. But we think that what Williams has put together here is very comprehensive. We like the look, we like the location, and the cost obviously makes it the preferable site over the MSC site. So with that, we'll just entertain any questions, or anybody else on the committee want to add anything, feel free. So. You're muted, Margie.
Can you just share with everyone who the members of your subcommittee were?
Bill Westbrook, I'm kind of looking around here. Yanita, Chuck Manofsky, and who am I missing?
Wendy Gomez.
Wendy. There you are, down there. I'm trying to find, it's like Hollywood Squares here. I'm trying to find everybody on here.
Thank you. I didn't mean to give you a pop quiz, but really great. You had great input from the members of the subcommittee. So questions of Greg?
I just want to say it's really been a great interactive process between the committee and the consultants and the city folks to kind of come to get where we've gotten to. And I think we're all pretty happy with it. But Feel free
would
to
like
jump
to
in if you want.
I would like to add, Greg, that as part of the work that our committee did, we were often reviewing a lot of the feedback and the emails that were received by the community. So that was very, very important to us as, you know, as we get that feedback, we were looking for ways to definitely consider a lot of the pedestrian safety, the traffic, you know, a lot of the considerations. So that's all something that's critically important to the success of this idea.
Great. Okay. Members of the task force will still have some time if they have any additional questions towards the end. Before we move on to Matt's report out on the finance subcommittee, I wanted to remind folks there's still an opportunity if you'd like to provide public comment to submit that email request to city.council@uaoh.net. Just want to make sure that if anybody is interested in providing public comment that they can do that. Just go to that, send that email request to the city clerk and we'll make sure that you get included on the list. So with that, Matt, you're on.
Thanks, Margie. Let me first start by introducing the members of the finance subcommittee. It was a great collaborative effort. And I think we've got all the subcommittee members here with us here tonight. So Linda Mauger, Brian Pereira, and Todd Walter and myself walked through this exercise for the last several months with city staff and an excellent consulting group, Leon and his team at Pros Consulting, helping us examine the financial feasibility of the community center. And what I'm gonna do tonight in the interest of time is I'm gonna quickly go through the two main components, the process we use to examine the capital stack that would be used to fund the construction and design of the community center, and then walk through our analysis of the ongoing operations and the operational feasibility of a community center. We're going to go light on the slides. Leon, we're just going to narrow it down to two in the interest of time. We can look at the membership rates when we get into the operating stack, and we'll look at the stress test as well. But the first thing we tackled, Greg, we worked hand in hand with the other subcommittees, and we really heard two things of importance that launched us in our analysis. One was that the community had a strong preference to proceed without seeing an increase in property taxes. So as we looked at the capital stack, we used that as a launching point to say, how can we fund this community center without going back to the community and asking for an increase in property taxes? And the second thing, of course, is using the estimates that Greg and the facilities subcommittee worked through on the capital costs, and that was about 54 million. So that was our target for funding. So with regard to the capital sources, that 54 million, as we examined what funds were available and what ongoing revenue streams were available to leverage debt. And so we first looked at, the first bucket we looked at was existing city reserves. The city walked us through how the city has about $5 million right now of reserve funds above and beyond the city council recommended 30% operating reserve. So we took that 5 million and counted that as our first 5 million that could be applied towards this community center. The second thing we looked at is we did an analysis of what the philanthropic potential may be here. And I think there was a lot of conversation with community members, and we came to the conclusion that we believed about $5 million additionally could be raised from private philanthropic sources. What that left us with was about $44 million debt issuance that needed to be raised. And so the question became, how would that $44 million of debt be funded on an ongoing basis? And we walked through with city staff the existence of several TIFs that are currently in existence in Upper Arlington with various expiration dates, and also the anticipated TIF revenue from the Continental development at the Kingsdale site. And when the existing TIF revenue is combined with the anticipated TIF revenue from the Continental site, there is about there's funding per annum of about $2.4 million that would allow us to raise that $44 million in debt proceeds. So between the TIF revenue, the excess reserves available to the city, and the anticipated philanthropic dollars put forward by the community, the $54 million capital cost as a subcommittee we felt was obtainable without having to go back to residents to ask for an increase in property taxes. So I would say, for our subcommittee, surprisingly, the capital stack, because of the forward planning of the city, both with regard to excess reserves and excess TIF funds, came together quite nicely. And so we were able to spend our time as a subcommittee really drilling down into the operating pro forma. We heard both informally and formally through surveys. One of the main concerns of the community was, even if we have the proceeds to fund the construction and design of a community center, do you have the proceeds lined up, the ongoing revenue to sustain the operations of a community center without having to go back to the residents for an increased tax levy down the road? So we spent a lot of time with Pros Consulting examining the operational model of the community center. And Leon, if you can put up your initial run operating model, we can walk through that. But what we found from Pros Consulting in working with the city staff was that the revenues generated from a roughly 100,000 square foot senior center, both the membership revenues and the annual fees, the membership revenues and the daily passes, go back to that initial slide, Leon, you were on the right one there, was about 107%. So not only would we break even here on an ongoing basis, but we would actually operate at a margin at the community center's full potential. You'll see here, Leon has broken down your revenue streams. That's a mixture of annual memberships and also programming revenue. One of the things that the subcommittee was quite adamant about, and I think really, was really an issue we coalesced around early, was that built into this pro forma, we felt it was important that we look to fund ongoing capital maintenance from the operations of the building. So you'll see here a maintenance and endowment fund under capital outlay. Thank you, Leon's highlighting it there. That is 5% of revenue that's funded from day one. So that starts off at about the tune of $167,000 and then grows each year with escalators as your revenue climbs each year. But the point there was to address the often raised concern and really good, really valid insight that, we want to establish from day one of an operational model that doesn't require us to go back to the community if there's a failure in the roof system, when mechanicals need replaced 20 years out. But we want to build in that reserve right into the model from day one. So the committee pushed into, this looks great. This pro forma is really encouraging. But what happens if things don't play out the way we hope they will? What happens if this model comes under some significant pressures in the future? So Leon, if you could move to the stress test. The Pros Consulting Group worked with us on a stress test here. And you'll see off to the left of this particular slide some of the pressures they applied against the original pro forma. So they assumed a 33% drop in memberships, a 50% drop in daily admissions, significantly reduced program capacity, and also annual rental revenue. And what we found out here, and they still maintain that maintenance reserve, even in the stress test models, the annual funding of the maintenance reserve. We'll note here that the cost recovery drops, not surprisingly, and it drops around 80%. So there was a gap, and you'll see that in the red there, that kind of is between $600,000 to $750,000 per annum should these stress test measures come to fruition. So, this was important for a few reasons. One, it showed kind of what we hope to be a worst case scenario. And it showed that under those pressures, there's still a manageable hole in the budget. And I'll stress that when I say manageable, what we look to here is we really ask city officials, what would be the plug if we were under some of these pressured situations and there was an annual revenue shortfall. And the city brought to the attention of the subcommittee that currently the city funds about $500,000 per annum towards community services that post-community center would actually flow from the community center. So there's about $500,000 today that the city spends, and Debbie and her team spend on services that may be programming provided to seniors or young adults. That could be a variety of different city services that in the future would be housed within this community center and built into the operational pro forma of the center. So if we were to apply that historical $500,000 per annum, those monies, those proceeds towards the community center, it would be very close to sufficing to fill this gap in any given year. We, as a subcommittee, we heard concerns about, the ongoing capital maintenance, and we were encouraged that the pro forma attacked those and accounted for those. We heard concerns about, a pro forma is just that. It's a pro forma. You need to put some pressure on it and see what the results are. We were encouraged by the stress test results here. And we also heard concerns about the affordability of annual memberships. And if Leon, if you could go towards, pull that slide up here. Thank you. Leon here has a very detailed breakdown of basic membership, premier membership, senior membership options at the community center. And this is market-driven data based not only upon the community survey that was done, but also based upon what we're seeing from adjacent communities. And what was encouraging for us as a subcommittee is that these different membership breakdowns are cost obtainable. If you'll look here for a family of 4, for a basic membership, which provides access to the unlimited use of the facility, it's a $70 per month charge. And we really pressed in as a subcommittee to look at bifurcating the membership offers. That's been something that historically has been done in Upper Arlington with the senior center. And so working with pros, we have a very, I think, very attentive to the community's needs on the senior pass fees. And so those are $48 per year for a senior social membership. And then for a senior healthy lifestyle, which is full use of the entire facility during off-peak times, that fees a manageable $96 a year. It was important for us as a subcommittee, I think, to see some of those, see the fees broken out by different demographic categories based on what Upper Arlington has been able to offer historically. The operating, I would say that the last thing that I would press into on the operating budget was something that really came up frequently and then was reiterated late in the process. And Supan really, her subcommittee pointed back to the survey and some of the informal commentary they had received early in the process to highlight this issue. And that was, how are we going to accommodate for folks that otherwise may not be able to afford a membership here at the community center? I think it was really important to the entire, to our subcommittee and also to the entire committee from the outset that this be an obtainable, the memberships here be at an attainable price point for all members of the community. And so what the pro forma contemplates, and you'll see in our recommendations, is for the annual funding of a scholarship endowment at 2%, that would be funded from 2% of the membership revenue. That's built right into the pro forma from the outset. For, our conclusion from working through both the original pro forma and the stress tested pro forma was that ongoing, the community center is an operationally viable model. There is a market for community memberships here that's in line with adjacent communities and is supportive of the pro forma set forth. So we've laid out, you'll have in the recommendations that were circulated to the entire committee prior to this meeting, we've laid out some of the specifics, both around the capital stack and around the operational budget. But at this time, I would invite any other members of our subcommittee first to comment on the process in its entirety or any of the specific recommendations that have been circulated to the full committee.
Anything members want to add or questions from the all the task force members? Diane.
Yes.
Just a question. I didn't see any place on the senior and the senior memberships, silver sneakers, maybe a detail, but just curious.
And that was a question that Diane, I know Debbie addressed that earlier, the Silver Sneakers program. And Debbie, you can nail this one. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. So Silver Sneakers is an opportunity for seniors that qualify for supplemental Medicare to use the Medicare program actually pays the city the fees that for a senior to have either membership or a membership to our fitness room and some wellness classes. We would still be able to utilize those programs for seniors to have reduced rates. So the rate you're seeing is basically like the market rate. How a senior pays for it either themselves or through their arrangements with Medicare supplemental payments is how they would pay for it. It would still be applicable as a method for payment.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Sure.
Good question. Anyone else? Questions? Okay. What we want to do now is we want to have a motion to approve a resolution of support for the feasibility of the community center for the city of Upper Arlington. And I don't know if Emma or Jeff, you can actually bring up the resolution so folks can see it. Thank you. And we're going to have Nick, I know that you're going to kind of go through this for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, Margie, before I do that, you just want to remind folks of how we'll sequence this. We'll read it first and then we'll open it up to public comment and then have discussion and then vote. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll do that. You'll read it. We'll have public comment. We'll also have additional task force discussion. It's an opportunity once we've read through this for the task force to ask questions. And then you're exactly right. We'll then call for a formal vote to approve.
Okay, great. Well, bear with me. This is a very healthy resolution. I think it's comprehensive and captures everything you've heard to date this evening and throughout the last 18 months. So a resolution of support for the feasibility of the community center for the city of Upper Arlington. Whereas in July 2019, Upper Arlington City Council formed the community center feasibility task force, which was comprised of 16 residents, to ask if the community wants and needs a community center. And if the answers were yes, to determine what facilities and programming should be included, explore possible locations, and identify appropriate funding strategies. And whereas, with professional guidance of a consultant team led by Williams Architects and support from city staff, the CCFTF undertook an extensive 18-month feasibility study process that included the following key elements to fulfill its charge from City Council. I'll spare you from reading these 8 points again. We covered those at the outset of the meeting. Whereas the Community Engagement Subcommittee developed and oversaw an extensive community engagement process that included 2 statistically valid surveys totaling 932 participants conducted in March and November 2022, an online survey with 1,609 participants, community pop-up events that reached more than 460 residents, stakeholder interviews and focus groups, and multiple public community meetings. And whereas community awareness of the CCFTF study process was very high, 70.5% from the November statistically valid survey. And whereas support for a community center, if funded without a tax increase, was 79% and 74.8% respectively in the phase 1 and phase 2 statistically valid surveys. And these are both captured in the appendix. And whereas the second statistically valid survey demonstrated strong support for including senior center programming and facilities as part of a community center, and that's almost 70%. And whereas in the phase 1 statistically valid survey, the top activities households will use are number 1, exercise and fitness, 2, classes, 3, aquatics, 4, drop-in activities, 5, lifelong learning classes, and 6, senior activities. And whereas in the phase 1 statistically valid survey, the top features households would use are 1, weight room and cardio, 2, walking and running track, 3, aerobics and dance, 4, aquatic programming, and 5, senior programming. And whereas in the March survey, 70% of the residents believe that a community center should be geographically located as close to the middle of our community as possible. And whereas the 2018 Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan documented that existing parkland should preserve, since the city currently only offers a little bit more than 5 acres per 1,000 residents. And whereas the task force, led by the Facilities Subcommittee, evaluated 14 sites across Upper Arlington and narrowed that list to 2 finalist sites through a rigorous scoring and qualitative evaluation process that considered such factors as site control, preservation of green space, centrality of location, access to alternate means of transportation, and the ability to provide creative financing. The 2 finalist sites were the Municipal Services Center and the former Macy's site at Kingsdale. And whereas the former Macy's site at Kingsdale is centrally located and is accessible via pedestrian, bike, or mass transit, and the roadway network is conducive for vehicular access, and whereas development of a community center as part of the Kingsdale mixed-use project would create an unparalleled level of synergy between and among the adjacent shops and restaurants, office and professional, medical uses, and residents, whereas a community center building at Kingsdale would cost approximately $26 million less than to construct an alternative option at the Municipal Services Center. And whereas the former Macy's site at Kingsdale was the preferred location in the phase 2 statistically valid survey at 75%. And whereas in the phase 2 survey, respondent support for including office space to offset operating and maintenance costs was 68.3%. And whereas the CCFTF will provide City Council with a report documenting all of the data and analysis behind these findings and recommendations in January of 2021. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Community Center Feasibility Task Force that it finds and recommends the following. Section 1, it is feasible for the City of Upper Arlington to construct, operate, and maintain a community center to serve the residents of Upper Arlington. Section 2, the proposed community center should include program space for seniors, thereby replacing the current senior center on Ridgeview Road. Section 3, the proposed facility should be more than just a recreation facility and should serve as a central gathering place for the whole community. Section 4, the Kingsdale site is the preferred location for a community center. Section 5, the total construction budget should be approximately $54 million. Section 6, in light of the current and projected availability of other funding sources, it is recommended that no increase in property taxes be pursued to fund construction costs, provided that tax increment financing or TIF funds are available, including but not limited to approximately $17 million generated by the Kingsdale mixed-use project on the balance of the former Macy's site. Section 7, leveraging TIF proceeds, community center office lease revenues, and hotel motel tax to pay off the debt for a community center appears to be an appropriate use of these ongoing funding streams. Section 8, utilizing existing excess city funds, reserves in excess of the 30% operating expenses threshold recommended by City Council for capital funding would be appropriate as long as it does not negatively impact other city services, including other capital improvement projects. Section 9, philanthropic dollars should be pursued to leverage debt proceeds with a goal of 10% of total capital costs for a community center. Section 10, the operations and facility maintenance of the current senior center should discontinue as soon as a community center has been constructed, and funding for this facility should be redirected to the community center. Section 11, a business model should be pursued that is based on competitive and market rate membership fees and programming spaces to meet cost recovery goals. Section 12, the city should aggressively pursue a cost recovery model of not less than 85% of total community center operating expenditures. Section 13, it is appropriate that the city's historical operating funding, approximately $500,000 per annum, over and above revenue collected for recreation service, remain as an investment in community services. Recreation services are components of the Parks and Recreation Department that provide programs in the community center, parks, and other community locations. The operation of a community center would not negatively impact city services. Section 14, the community center pro forma should include significant annual contributions to a fund for future capital expenditures, such as maintenance and equipment replacement. Section 15, participation fee levels should be tiered, with a particular emphasis on options to accommodate senior residents. Section 16, the operating budget for a community center should include a scholarship fund utilizing a dedicated annual line item of not less than 2% of membership revenue to assist residents facing financial barriers to participation. Section 17, while the task force did not review financial modeling related to the leasing of city-owned adjacent office space, the site appears to be an attractive amenity-rich location, and the city should work to ensure that third-party market studies support underwritten office lease rates and make best efforts to secure an office tenant prior to construction commencement. In Section 18, partnerships to enhance program offerings and operations funding are encouraged. And we have an appendix that shows you preliminary building program, building massing and stacking, as well as preliminary order of magnitude construction budget, which the subcommittee chairs all talked through. So with that, Margie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I know it took a little bit of time, but sometimes you have to hear it as well as read it to really absorb it, because this is a really important resolution and the result of a lot of work by everybody on the team. So now we would like to open it to public comment, and can we, if we have the names of those individuals, and we can have them join us.
Yes, we have one speaker, Jeffrey Bevan. I'll bring him over.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bevan?
How about now? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. I didn't realize I had to push a button on my end. So
that's okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you. And thanks for everybody's hard work and the presentation this evening. And I had the opportunity to sit in last week as well. I'm Jeff Bevan. I live at 3115 Mount Holyoke Road. And I've just got these underlying concerns about the location. I live 4 blocks from Kingsdale. I don't have a park or a city facility 4 blocks from my house, nor have I had in the 30 plus years I've lived here in Upper Arlington with my family. So it's exciting to think about, but I also, outside of community feedback and the popularity of the location and all the things that you guys have studied, I just want to make sure that I voice some concerns about the impact on the surrounding neighborhoods, the impact on the triangle, and the long-term impact on potential economic opportunities up there as well, that will be absorbed by some public use by using Kingsdale as a site. So Just without getting too deep into some of the things I've got here, because I unfortunately feel like the decision's already been made. I saw a quote last week that I was going to share with you before we just did, I guess, chat last week instead of public comments. But I saw this quote. It says, "What is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right." And I thought that was quite applicable to what you guys are going through right now, because popularity is obviously an issue. I'm concerned about traffic. I understand, looking at the traffic studies, that the community center itself will generate as many visits to the triangle as the rest of the development that Continental has presented. And that's a concern based on what Giant Eagle already generates, the medical center, the current retail and restaurants up there, 450 new apartments, and Aldi. And then any future development along Northwest Boulevard that I know has been presented at times, and I'm sure will come back on the drawing board again someday. There's side effects to this. There's side effects that we feel every day with the 5 Points intersection clog that everybody here on the call, I'm sure, has felt. It can't handle the traffic today, and therefore the neighborhoods have become bypasses. The city's been great addressing these issues here recently in lieu of the project at Kingsdale, and I do look forward to some mitigation opportunities here in Wakefield Forest, but I feel that the community center is going to contribute to that, exacerbate it, and it's a concern to me. So that's what I'm speaking to right now. I had hoped that the decision wasn't made already in lieu of some of these concerns that I have, and concerns of the side effects of placing the community center at Kingsdale, if I may. And I just wanted to ask if these other things were put into consideration, weighing them, equally to the popularity of residents' vote on where they think a location should go. So that's a concern. Have we weighed those impacts? I guess I also have a question too. I know there's still a traffic study that needs to be completed, a comprehensive one, reviewed by the city and approved. What if that doesn't go through? What are options then as far as the community center goes and the vote in May? Because those things have to be figured out first, and it kind of gets that cart ahead of the horse question going. And then finally, with respect to the second location, I don't know what the answer to this is, and maybe somebody can send me an email. What's the expected life of the municipal services building? As far as, in 5 years, will it need to be replaced? In 10 years, will it need to be replaced? And was that taken into consideration when that location was discussed? Does it make sense to spread the traffic down a mile further than cramming it all into the center of the city? Does that make sense to people? And then what would the benefits and offset be to building on the municipal services center site and leaving the property at Kingsdale open for private use, economic development, versus now having two public use properties within a mile of each other? Was that offset considered in the financial model? And that's really just the final piece of it. So again, I'll ask that question, what I started with. What's right is not always popular, and what's popular is not always right. That's Albert Einstein said that, not me. And he was a pretty smart guy. So that's just it. That's my public comments for the night, and some considerations. Whether they're open to be considered or not. You guys have spent a lot of time and possibly already chosen Kingsdale, and the ship may have sailed already. But I do want you to sleep on these things, and when you wake up in the morning, if any of it sways you a little bit, then feel free to give me a call, and I'll give you some more details outside of my 3-minute allowance here. But I do want to thank you for the work you've done, and it's exciting, and the prospect of having this come to fruition after the vote in May. So that's all I've got for you. Thank you.
That's very thoughtful comments, Jeffrey. We really appreciate it. And I'm certain that there'll be somebody from likely from the city staff or one of our task force members that will be following up with you after this meeting. So thank you for taking the time to be here and for providing the input. We do really appreciate it. Are there others, Ashley?
There is not. That was our only speaker this evening.
Okay, thank you. Task force members, any additional questions? I know this has been a long journey, lots of information, lots of outreach, lots of assistance from the consultants and the city staff, and each of you. Any additional questions you've got on the resolution or on the work we've done thus far?
Margie, I don't have a question, but just a clarification, and I appreciate Nick walking through the resolution. You know, Section 7 of the resolution talks about the various proceeds used to fund the bond issuance. And the resolution is accurate. You know, the majority of those proceeds annually to service the debt will be from TIF proceeds. But the balance of the annual debt service will be paid from a combination of hotel, motel tax that's available, and also, if needed, any excess lease income from the office lease, the office lease income generated from the office space on top of the community center. So just wanted to clarify that. I think I had referenced in my comments that it was solely from TIF proceeds, but it is a combination of those three sources as laid out in the resolution. So thanks for walking through that, Nick.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So Matt, you're reaffirming that what's in the resolution is an accurate reflection.
It is an accurate statement. Absolutely.
That's great. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
I had a question just about the where we are or what we are required to do building construction wise with a traffic study. What does that involve?
I think I'll let Steve, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'll take that. Thanks, Diane, for the question. So there's a traffic study there are a couple of traffic studies that are going on as it relates primarily to the Continental proposal at Kingsdale. But as Mr. Bevan alluded to, what the Public Service Department is doing is using it because, let me back up for a second. There are basically two scenarios. One is that a community center is built, and one is that a community center isn't built and an apartment building is built in its place. The community center is a more traffic intensive use than the apartment building. So what our Public Service Department is doing is they're going through and checking the models that were done by the consultants or by the developers consultants, and making sure that they are comfortable with those models and they agree with those models. Additionally, they've gone in and done some of their own work on the neighborhoods adjacent to Kingsdale, in particular the neighborhoods to the east, which is one of the neighborhoods where not one of the neighborhoods where Mr. Bevan lives, the neighborhood where Mr. Bevan lives. And so Jackie and her team have gone in and looked at that. So we are going through that process. We're comfortable, I think, at this point that the traffic is not going to overwhelm the road system that we have there. We believe that it can handle it. It will require some improvements. It'll require some additional turn lane on Fishinger headed east at 5 Points. So they're working on that. Fortunately, we're coming up on a big reconstruction project of Fishinger that we had already planned before all this came up. So we'll be making some improvements to Fishinger already. And so we'll be able to incorporate some of this work into those improvements. So we are looking very closely at that. We actually have a meeting next Thursday evening, which will be our second meeting with the Wakefield Forest neighborhood to talk about some solutions that our Public Service Department has come up with to help with traffic and other safety issues in the Wakefield Forest neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Any questions? Linda.
not a question, it's a comment. When we started this project 18 months ago, we were in person and then we had a pandemic and we continued without missing a beat. And I just want to thank Margie and Nick because the task force keeps being thanked, but we need to thank our leaders because this was not an easy transition. We were discussing and considering really, really important, complicated potential plans. And I thank you so much for helping us get through it and for the city staff's support. This transition has been amazing. And I think we all would much rather be in the room together, figuring things out, but it has worked and thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. We had to pivot. That's the word for the day. Be agile, pivot, and innovate. So we've done all those as a team. So I appreciate your comments. Anyone else? If not, I'm.
Did you-
I got one comment. Also reiterate what Linda said, and also want to thank the committee, the subcommittee chairs. I know you guys did a lot of extra work as well. And as I sit back and look and think about what we were originally tasked with, one of it was to come up with the feasibility of this. And so, you know, there's a lot of good work has been done. I take a lot of comfort in knowing that what we've been told all along is a presentment to council who will likely take this to the voters, right? So to the public comment that we got, this is a feasibility analysis. It was looked at and would encourage, as part of our recommendation, that council continue, as Greg alluded to have a lot of dialogue with the community now that it's moved beyond conceptual to preliminary drawings, a cost, and understanding how it will be capitalized, which will be valuable. And I take comfort that the community will ultimately decide if this is something that they want to pursue or not. It's not simply our decision. So thank you to everyone. It's been a good process so far.
Todd, thank you. I appreciate you reaffirming and thanking the work of the chairs of the subcommittee, because they had to lead the charge with what they were expected to do. So thank you. And also thank you for reminding all of us that this is the beginning of a journey of community engagement. And I am totally confident that as we move forward, should the community, the residents of Upper Arlington, support this in May, that we will continue to have active community engagement to make sure that what is in that community center is what our citizens want. So this is a journey. We're pretty far along on the journey, but we've got a ways to go. So I appreciate that comment. Anything else? Okay, hearing none. We want to call for the vote then. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Who was that? Nick, okay. A second. I saw Linda Malakis will second. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. That's terrific. And there's two more motions that we want to present that were on the agenda. The first is to authorize the task force and the subcommittee chairs to finalize the report. And we will be recommending that and present that to the city council, as we've indicated, is it next Wednesday? The 16th of December. So do we want to authorize the task force and subcommittee chairs to actually finalize the report with many appendices and all of the detail that we've developed over the last 18 months? That final report will be presented to City Council at their January meeting, when they'll finally make the decision about moving forward with placing this issue on the ballot. So the meeting on the 16th is really to present our resolution and for their review, and then they will make their final decision at their January meeting. So do I have a motion to authorize the task force and subcommittee chairs to finalize this report for presentation in January?
So moved.
Okay, Linda Mauger, and I have a second?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Bill? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. And then one final one, which is mostly, and it'll make Ashley very happy. A motion to authorize the task force chairs to approve the final minutes from this meeting, so that we don't necessarily have to convene another meeting to just approve the minutes from this meeting. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Lisa and Matt seconded. Thank you. And all those in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. Okay, so thank you for that. And just to kind of reiterate next steps. So as I said a minute ago, next Wednesday, December 16th, the task force co-chairs and subcommittee chairs are gonna present our findings and our recommendations to City Council. It's an open meeting. Any of you are welcome to join to hear that presentation one more time. Please, we encourage you to attend, and we encourage anybody from the public to attend. And depending on that feedback, we may call, I'm sure you're all waiting on bated breath to know whether this is your last meeting of the task force. It may be, however, if there are some questions or something that's raised by City Council, or either between now and the January meeting, we may call one more meeting of the task force. So we will keep you apprised of that, and it would be in January sometime. So we'll keep you posted on whether we are going to have that meeting, so that you could get that on your calendars. And we will work with the consultants to turn the recommendations in this resolution, as I said, in a very comprehensive final task force report with a lot of the supporting documentation. And once again, in January, we anticipate that council will vote to accept our recommendations and place something on the ballot for the residents to vote on in May. And I know that the staff were already working on, in preparation for that potential, on the draft of some ballot language that has to be presented by a deadline. I think it's February 3rd to get it placed on the May ballot. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that. Nick, my esteemed co-chair, any final comments?
Just to reiterate on both our behalves, all of the tremendous work that all of you have done. Several of you I knew coming into this process, and I've rekindled those friendships and made a ton of new ones, and just have an enormous amount of respect for the diversity of the perspectives that were brought to this. I think we all had an open mind from the outset of how to proceed. We've talked repeatedly about this, but council has had a hands-off attitude towards this work and really charged us to go forward and partner with the consulting team and city staff. For those residents like myself who've never been really active in any city-led efforts prior to this, I think we can all say that the city of Upper Arlington has an incredibly talented staff from top to bottom, and it's been a pleasure working with all of them. And I don't know that we would have been able to accomplish what we've just gone through this evening without all of the consultants. You guys have been flexible with us. You've really been patient in helping us have that rigor and thoroughness that we've brought to this. So for Margie and myself, we want to thank all of you for your time and commitment to this, but especially the three subcommittee chairs, Supen, Greg, and Matt. I think we've talked about this, but a tremendous amount of this work really occurred in your subcommittees here towards the end of phase 1 and in phase 2. I know the first several times we met, it kind of felt like it was just a real slow locomotive, but we promised you would pick up steam and kind of end with a crescendo. And I, for one, am really proud of what we're going to advance to City Council, and really want to thank Margie for keeping me on track. And hopefully we've delivered a product that we can all feel very proud of. So on behalf of both of us, thanks to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. And before we close out, Steve, if you have any comments to make as our city manager, particularly on behalf of your staff.
Well, you know me well enough to know that I'm going to have some comments to make. You know, I took this job 14, 15 months ago, and when I walked in and hey, we want you to look at can we build a community center? Oh, by the way, we've already picked a group of folks that are going to help you, and we want them to kind of drive the process. Yeah, okay. We'll take that. And then I took a look at the list, you know, there are a couple names on the list that I knew some things about. And once I got past those couple names and realized, you know, I got to actually work with Lashetka, you know, got through that, I realized that this group had incredible potential and incredible insight. And that was just with the people that I knew. And then as I've gotten to know each of you, I was sitting here looking at the Hollywood Squares boxes, as Greg dates all of us on this call that we know what Hollywood Squares was, and realized I can look at each box and think of a moment in this process where each of you did something to move this process forward, brought someone to the table, brought an idea to the table, asked us or the consultants a really tough question. Look, I've worked in government for the better part of 23 years. I have never been in a process where I've had a group of this size work at this length, at this depth, where everyone has stayed engaged the whole time. And I can do that, and I can look around and I can say where every single one of the people on this has made a real and meaningful contribution. There aren't enough ways in which, on behalf of myself, Dan, excuse me, Dan, Debbie, Jeff, Emma, Joe, Ashley, and a whole bunch of other people within the team who have worked on this. I don't have enough ways to say thank you. So I'll stop trying and just simply say thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Back at you. Having no more business to come before the task force, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. We don't want to be here all night.
So moved.
Todd, thank you. Bless you. Do I have a second? Linda, thank you. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Okay, I'm sure opposed, no, the same sign, but there will be no opposed. Our meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
And
Thanks.
hopefully we'll see some of you, maybe most of you, next Wednesday evening. So take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.